And look, next up we have Pat Kenny from the EPA, and Pat is the lead of the National Ambient Air Quality Unit, and Pat is going to be talking to us about heating our homes and air quality. Pat, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Micheál, and good afternoon, everyone. Yep, Pat Kenny with the National Ambient Air Quality Unit in the EPA, and I'm going to talk about air quality and the impact that how we heat our homes has on our air quality. I notice my clock hasn't started yet either, so does that mean I get an extra 30 seconds? So I'm going to briefly set a bit of context here. I'm going to talk about the AMP, that's the National Ambient Air Quality Monitoring Programme. I'm going to briefly touch on Irish air quality, and then I'm going to swing around to pollutants of concern, or in this instance, pollutant of concern, PM2.5, fine particulate matter in our air, where the dominant source is domestic solid fuel heating. I'm going to talk about and link through to that on heating our homes, and then very importantly, what actions can we all take? So, the AMP, the National Ambient Air Quality Monitoring Programme, we have gone within the last few years to expand our national monitoring network. It's one of the 3 core pillars of that programme. We've also gone and expanded our capacity and capability for modelling and forecasting for air quality, and we've linked through with that for some actions on citizen science that you heard about a little bit earlier, be it Globe Schools or Clean Air Together. So, from the network, you can see here's how we looked at the end of 2021, and we've grown from 29 stations before we started in 2017 through to 103 today. We're heading for 116, and all of this information is available online on airquality.ie, and I'll repeat that one too, airquality.ie. It's also available on the air pages of epa.ie, and it's provided via an air quality index for health, where we take all that information, we convert it into a readily understandable index all the way through from green being good, red being poor, and purple being very poor. And we also use all this data and information to produce our annual air quality reports. And our most recent one came out just this autumn, Air Quality in Ireland 2021. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, and if you looked at an air quality report a few years ago, it's quite different now. We've done something very different this year. It's much more interactive than it's ever been before. It's a lot of embedded videos, graphics, etc. I would encourage you to go in and take a look. Maybe I would say that, but I really would encourage you to go take a look at it. So what does it say? We have no exceedances of the EU limit values, and I know some of our speakers earlier on this morning said this too, but the majority of our stations can't meet the new, tighter World Health Organization guideline values that came out early autumn this time last year. The majority of our premature deaths, and those figures that you hear, the majority of those premature deaths are due to PM2.5, fine particulate matter, fine particles in our air. And this is really where we get into talking about how we heat our homes, because the dominant source of those particles is domestic solid fuel heating. Now, we say our pollutants of concern are PM2.5 and NO2. NO2 is from transport. I'm not going to talk very much about that at all today. And again, that report is available on our website and also on airquality.ie, and there's its front cover. So, this graph here is a lot for your screens, though it's actually coming out less fuzzy than it does in some other places where I've given this similar slide. So you can see there the difference. As I was just saying, you can see that we had no exceedances to EU limit values as the CAFE directive or Clean Air for Europe is currently constructed. But it's a very different story when you look across that range of pollutants when you compare it to the new World Health Organization guideline levels. And to look at that second blowdown, here's this blown up a bit for the benefit of everyone, including my eyesight. For PM2.5, you can see at 81 stations last year, which is the year we've full data analysis and crunching and reporting, that of those 81 stations, we were above that guideline level at 65 stations when you look at the annual value, and above it at 61 when you look at the daily. Now, that is the current WHO, which is set at 5 micrograms per metre cubed as an annual average. The current EU value is set at 20. There is a draft version of the CAFE directive that the Commission came out with about a week and a half ago. It's moving now to 10 by 2030 is what it's proposing, along that pathway, as Ian talked about, towards eventually 2050 and the zero pollution objective. If we talk about 2030 and moving to 10, to put in the context of these numbers, on the 2021 figures that are shown here, we would have had 6 of our stations that would have exceeded, if that were to be the European directive level, they would have exceeded in 2021, and we would have had another 6 that would have been very, very borderline. They wouldn't have exceeded, but in a year, perhaps with different weather conditions, they certainly would have exceeded. So just to put it in that context of where legislation is looking at the moment. So again, to look at the graphics on this, and if you look at this graph, concentrations have been coming down over the years. There is no doubt about that. This is, again, PM2.5. It's averaged across zones. That's those different coloured lines. For the purposes of European reporting legislation, Ireland is split up into 4 zones. A is Dublin, B is Cork, C is large towns, and D is the rest of the country. So it's coming down. You can see it's below the 20, which is an annual limit value from the EU, but it's above the 5. Now, you can also see it's largely below the 10 when you average across all the zones, but it's at a localised level we see problems right across the country at individual stations. And we also see our problems very much when you look at it over the run of the year. And again, to promo our air report, this is actually in as a very nice embedded video with a very nice voiceover. Not from me, thankfully, but from one of my colleagues who we discovered certainly as a voice for radio when we're going to put out this report this year. So you can see there's a rapid fall off when you come out of the winter and we start going into spring and summer. And then, sadly, you can see it start to rise again. Again, this is PM2.5. This graph is actually, we averaged every single station in the country for this particular graph. Because we're thinking, would we pick these? Would we pick those? No, we averaged every single station. That's what that graph is showing. This is the impact of seasonality, but more importantly, is the impact of home heating on PM2.5 and a resultant impact on human health due to those premature death figures that we're all very, very aware of. So we look to try to communicate these issues of how we heat our home and their impact on air quality. We've developed this infographic. This is the 7th version of this because we're looking to continually improve. I actually quite like this version of it. I think it's quite a nice, neat, clean infographic. This is reflecting the latest change in the solid fuel regulations that we very much welcome coming through from DEC. And coming into effect at the end of October with the new restrictions on certain solid fuels nationwide. So what it's showing is the worst choice from air quality and health and the best choice from air quality and health. Running along the top, you see the ways you can actually burn a fuel linked with a fuel. And on the bottom, we're showing fuels themselves. And essentially, what we're also looking to convey in this is that if due to geographical or for economic reasons, you are linked with a solid fuel heating system, you do still have choices there. You have choices in the fuel that you use in that system. And if you are in a position, and not everyone is, to make choices in that, you can have a very positive impact on the air quality in your local area. And again, any move you can make along that spectrum of home heating choices is going to be positive from an air quality and health viewpoint. So what can we do? In the wider context and wider air quality, again, Ireland and Europe moving towards achieving WHO, and we do see a move towards that in that draft, I suppose, recast of the Clean Air for Europe or CAFE directive that is out. Measures addressing fuel poverty need to also improve air quality, and there needs to be a linkage there. Local authorities need to ensure that there are adequate resources for air enforcement in their local areas. The National Clean Air Strategy, which is currently being developed by DEC and was out for public consultation last year, that needs to be fully published and implemented. And we need nationwide investment in clean public transport. Specifically when it comes to PM2.5, we need to change how we heat our homes. And this is in the context that this obviously is going to be a very difficult winter for an awful lot of households. There are a lot of households that aren't going to have a huge amount of choice in this. But where you do have choices and where you do have options, if you can move to cleaner choices, that would be very, very positive for air quality and health. This second bullet point, particularly in our urban areas, is really paramount in this point as well. It's about where you have alternatives. And again, there was a research project called Resolve Fuel. Again, I recommend you take a look at it if you haven't. It looked at the number of households that have secondary solid fuel heating systems. And when you count primary and secondary, households that have both a primary and a secondary solid fuel heating system, you're up at about 50% of Irish households. If you're in a still, cold winter evening in an urban area and you have a secondary solid fuel heating system, and if you have the option to not run that system, you're going to have a very positive impact on air quality in your local area, or certainly not have a negative impact. Equally, looking at the national retrofitting scheme and that side of it, if you are in a position to avail of those schemes, you're going to have a positive impact on your own home. You are going to make it more comfortable and energy efficient, but you're also going to be doing a good and having a positive impact for your neighbours and for your wider area as well. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm bang pretty much on time. Very, very happy to talk to you this afternoon on this topic, and very happy to answer any questions you might have on wider air quality and also those linkages through with how we heat our homes. Thank you.